Very warm welcome to everyone joining us for our July webinar. This is the second webinar we're having on this topic of species, either species that are new to science or species that have been thought to be long lost, that have been rediscovered, and any other adventures with fieldwork and taxonomy that our presenters today would like to share with us. So the title is Spotting Special Species, first sighting, second sighting, and the first webinar just wasn't enough. There's so much fabulous work being done, usually connected with CREW, custodians of rare and endangered wildflowers, and there are so many citizen scientists that are getting involved and doing incredible work. Also, the last time focused more on the Western Cape side of the country, and now we are focusing on the summer rainfall areas of the country. So if I could ask our first presenters, Kate and Graham Grieve, to turn on their video, I will introduce them more formally. So welcome, Kate and Graham. They've both had professional careers in Gauteng and decided on retirement to move to the lower KwaZulu-Natal South Coast, following their interests in nature and plants in particular. As they started to explore the flora of the area, they discovered so many interesting species, and their scientific interest developed, especially working with CREW. And they have been collaborating with many plant specialists over the years. They now don't spend so much time in the field, they've both said. They're more involved in sharing knowledge through publications, mentoring and contributing to iNaturalist. And how I met Graham was their publication, which is Plant Life. They're editors of Plant Life, an online journal, which I highly recommend you Google and participate in reading. And so they were saying as well that in addition to being flora fanatics, perfect alliteration for me, a flora fanatic, Graham is an avid photographer and Kate is a botanical artist. So very well, warm welcome to you both. And I'll hand over to you for the presentation.
Thanks, Cherise. Just getting it up.
Share screen.
In that one?
No, that's yep. Let's go backwards.
There we go. Right.
No, I don't think we are right yet. I'm just going to get back. We want to share screen, right?
And after share screen, just push start slideshow. Click up. There we go.
Have you got the whole screen, Cherise?
There we go.
Not yet. So just find.
There we are.
There we go. Well done.
Okay, good. Thank you. This afternoon, I'd like to give you your viewers a small glimpse into an area that many people are not familiar with, and that is the lower South Coast in KwaZulu-Natal, and also a little bit into the Eastern Cape, the Ponderland area. This section, it corresponds to the Ponderland Ugu coastal sandstone sourveld, which is the vegetation type characterized by the Msakaba sandstone substrate. And this particular combination of factors has given rise to a suite of plants that occur here and in many cases nowhere else. So there's a very high level of endemism, plant diversity, and it's regarded as one of the botanical hotspots of the world because of the endemism and also because of the threats that it faces. There's a wide variety of habitats. This is a view from Msakaba Nature Reserve, glorious grassland full of flowers, ever-changing as the season goes. And then these deep incised gorges with forests, grassland, wonderful rocks, some places very inaccessible, but the area actually extends from Orrery Gorge, Orrery Flats in the north, down to Port St. John's in the south. So even though the Ponderland coast might not be so accessible, the KZN coast certainly is. And then wonderful sites like this, waterfall also near Mkambati. And if and when the N2 goes past, when you're driving down to the Cape next time, that'll be something that you can see. So this area is called the Ponderland Center of Plant Endemism. And what many people might not know is that proportionately the Ponderland Center flora is comparable to the Cape Floristic region in terms of the number of endemic species by area. We were very fortunate in living in the area and making regular forays into particularly the Umtamvuna Nature Reserve at first, joining up with Crew, and then obviously going a bit further afield than that. But the big advantage of going to one area frequently is you get to know the suite of plants that is there, and there are many, many, many specials. But then you also recognize things that are a bit different and that need further attention. And the first plant that is on our list to share with you today is Hesperantha mtamvunae. And this is a very slender Hesperantha. And for many years, we saw it and everybody said, no, we don't quite know what that is. And one year I decided to tackle it. Hilliard's Key didn't give me any solutions, so I sent material to John Manning, who initially thought it might be affiliated to grandiflora. And then after deliberation decided, no, this is something new. So we had to go back and find fruiting material, which is not easy in a slender plant in amongst long, dense grass, but we did so. And he and Peter Goldblatt described the species. We had to wait for his Iridaceae book to come out to get the name, of course. But what is characteristic for us is that it flowers in June and July, which is very unusual in the summer rainfall area. And it's about 700 millimeters tall. So that was a real discovery as far as we were concerned. And in the Umtamvuna and then our area, you see sightings of special plants all the time. We could spend forever showing you those, but these are just some that we've chosen for you. And then another one that didn't have a name, we were told initially, it's just a Sabea, and nobody quite knows what it is. And we were lucky that Benny Beterbeer put us in touch with Jonathan Kisling from Zurich, a Gentianaceae specialist. And he just has described this as Ixochenium natalense. It has a checkered past, this one. It was initially described as Belmondia natalensis in about 1894, and then was put together with Ixochenium grande, and fortunately now it has been separated. It's very different from grande, for those of you who know that one, which is sort of buttercup yellow to even a darker yellow, much bigger flower, whereas this one is pure white, almost a blue-white, a very slender little plant, and it always grows in the damp or in a seep or even sometimes in standing water. So that we, together with Jonathan Kisling, we published the paper to describe this one and to give it its own official name. Another one that we encountered frequently on the rock sheets is this little Craterostigma. Again, we were told it's Craterostigma species Nov. And after many years, my curiosity got the better of me. So we went into it, and with the help of the herbarium in Cape Town, we found Drage's original specimens, because it appeared to be similar to Craterostigma nanum, but we didn't know what had happened to the name. And it is, in fact, Craterostigma nanum, and it was not so long ago lumped together with Craterostigma plantageneum, which is a very, very different species, but by a man in Germany who hadn't actually seen the plant, so perhaps he didn't realize quite how different it is. So with the help of Peter Bester at Sandby, we published a paper reinstating this name. So now it has its own name again. And then together with Brian Schreier, we did a lot of work on the indigophoras of the Ponderland Center. The one on the left caused us quite a lot of trouble because it was originally, Brian had names for all these plants, but they were never formally described. This one was called Indigophora gorgosa initially because that was where it was found growing at the Gorgosa outpost in the Umtamvuna Reserve. And for many years, we went there looking for it, couldn't find it. And we can only conclude that because of the cattle invasions to that part of the reserve, that it has been wiped out there. And then, with the help of INAT, there was a sighting lodged from the Lake Eland Reserve in Orreby Flats. And we went out to have a look, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these little plants with their gorgeous big flowers. And so it was called Indigofera hydra because it's no longer at Gogorza, because it has these upright multiple inflorescences. And the only one I can, we described about 7 or 8 new species, and the only one I can really claim to have sort of discovered was a varietal form of Indigofera hestrae, characterized by the very long peduncle in relation to the rachis, and a very slender plant, also growing in damp areas and seeps and sometimes water. And then another strange quandary was this tree. It was a Dovialis species that we'd come across at the Umtamvuna. Sent pictures to Richard Boone, and when he came out here recently, we took him to the tree, fortunately found it with flowers, and it's closest to Dovialis lucida, but Richard is working on it, and hopefully one of these days it will have its name. In this little Ipomoea, Tony Abbott had mentioned it many years ago. It is a tiny little plant, only about a few yards, about 2 centimeters tall, would you say? 50 is Graham.
50 millimeters.
50 millimeters. And it grows on the rock sheets, the flower right down to the ground, a beautiful little thing. We've sent material to botanists, and we're hoping that it will be described soon too. Another one from Combati was this Brachystelma or Ceropegia. I'm not quite sure which terminology is used at the moment. Also growing in the grassland, a very slender little plant. The information we have from botanists is that it is a new species, but it is also waiting, probably along with many other plants, waiting description. This is Tephrosia pondoensis. It's not a discovery as such. It's just that we had really struggled to find it in the wild. It's a gorgeous garden plant. As you can see here, it grows very easily, and it's unusual because of the color. And after searching various areas over the years, we finally found it in Combati down one of the streams, which is very rewarding because it's certainly not something you see often in the wild. And so we have moved further afield as well, away from the immediate Ponderland center of endemism, and Graham will talk more about those.
Thanks. And I think I'd like to reiterate a point that Kate made, and that is that if you want to be able to find new species, you have to be familiar with the other species that occur in an area. And the only way to do that really is to visit the same areas frequently, because things change all the time. We have experience from Umtamvuna where you could literally go every day of a week and the felt would be different colors every day. It really is amazing how quickly things can change. So one of the things that we found, and this we first found at Vernon Crooks Nature Reserve, and this was on a BioBlitz with Savannah, and we were wandering through grassland and found this little plant crawling over a low shrub. And I was fortunate to know Rhycruxia picta from Mpumalanga, and I recognized that this was also a Rhycruxia, but I didn't recognize the plant itself. Anyway, we collected material on that occasion, and Savannah sent it through to have identified. And it took a number of steps before eventually reaching Peter Bester in Pretoria, and he eventually confirmed that this was Rhycruxia Flanagani, subspecies Alexandrina, and the plant hadn't been seen for about 50 years prior to us finding it at Vernon Crooks. Subsequently, on a visit to a farm near Ikopo, High Flats area, we found more material, same species, and we thought that this new population was substantially bigger than the one at Vernon Crooks, and in my view, is probably still the main population that we're aware of this particular species. A couple of years later, we actually managed to find more material in another piece of grassland near High Flats, and so this species is fairly well distributed and is probably safe for the time being. Another one that we found in the farm near Jolivet was this Satyrium rhodanthum. Now, that is known from a number of other small subpopulations, but this was a new find, and we subsequently have determined that there must be somewhere in the order of about 500 plants on this particular farm. Nerine bowdeni subspecies. Bowdeni is a plant that I got involved with through the Royal Horticultural Society when they made a visit to South Africa to try and find where the original material of the species that grows widely in the UK, or is the basis for hybrids that they've created in the UK. And it was believed to come from the Eastern Cape, but they searched in the Eastern Cape and didn't manage to find any material. They knew of finds near Ngeli, an area that I was familiar with from a research project. So they asked me to participate, and we eventually found the plant in the left-hand corner, which was growing right next to the highway, the N2 highway. But clearly couldn't have been there all that long, because it would have been bare rock and ground when they built the road. So I then started searching for the origin of these plants, and managed to find them with help from a nurseryman near where I lived, managed to find another population very close to this one. Subsequently, we found more material on a mountain called Mountain Nolangeni near Kokstad. And I managed to get a researcher at UKZN interested in the pollination of the species. And she subsequently has been visiting the various sites that I've identified for her. But she's now found far more populations further towards the west and also into the Eastern Cape, probably the original source material that was being searched for by the RHS. She's also now come to the conclusion that the population that I discovered subsequently at Ngeli is probably not subspecies bowdeni, but may in fact be a new subspecies. And she concludes this from the fact that the pollinators that visit these plants at Ngeli are different to the ones visiting the plants in other areas. So she will be working on trying to identify this maybe as a new species. One of the things that we have tried to do is share knowledge of the stuff that we have discovered, or just the plants in the areas that we visit. So the left photograph is from Msikaba, and the right one is from Ongeluksnik. In both cases, we're taking people out with us to try and show them what they have in the areas that they live in. The other way we've tried to spread information is the Plant Life Journal that Cherise mentioned earlier on. But Kate and I, together with Dirk Belstead, produced a book on the botanical splendor of Ponderland Centre, and that was published last year. And it is available as a download from Sanbi if you wish. But we would love to have people submitting articles for Plant Life. We're always searching for material, and it doesn't really have to be South African material either. You know, we're interested in plants in general. So the address for submission of articles is up on the right. But thanks very much from you.
Fabulous. Thank you. Seeing the Nerine in the wild was beautiful. And I loved the feedback saying, if you really want to find things in the felt and truly appreciate what is there, going back every single day. And Kate, your point of the richness of your flora in your area being equal to that of the Cape Floral Kingdom. Just fabulous, the two of you. Thank you so much for participating. If you will check the chat for any questions or comments from people, that would be great. And then it's over to our next presenter, Roy Keister. His title is Tales of Plant Expeditions, Discoveries, Conservation, and Friendship. Lovely. Roy is a PhD candidate in the grassland science at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and he has a strong interest in plant and grassland conservation, ecology, and entomology. And he's loved nature since he was young, he says. His academic journey has been driven by a fascination with the interactions amongst plants, insects, and their environments, as well as a commitment to conducting meaningful research with real-world impact. His current work focuses on invasive plant management and ecological rehabilitation, and alongside his academic work, he's actively involved in plant conservation. Since joining the Midlands Crew program in 2019 and BOTSOC, the Botanical Society, yes, in 2021, he has participated in numerous field trips in search of rare and threatened species, and that's some of what he'll be sharing with us this evening. And just out of interest, Roy currently serves as the Botanical Society's KwaZulu-Natal Inland Ex Situ Threatened Plant Project Coordinator. It's quite a mouthful, where he collects seeds and cuttings of threatened flora for cultivation or long-term storage with the Millennium Seed Bank Partnership, with the ultimate goal of reintroduction into protected areas. Roy, wow, what a CV and a biog. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cherise. I'm just gonna switch my camera off. Okay, my talk is a bit less scientific compared to the Greaves, but I hope everyone enjoys it. Thank you. Just can't get the slide to change. There we go. So our journey begins in the Tugela Valley in search of Gasteria tucalensis. We searched and searched for it. Eventually, Sachin Dorasamy went off on his own. And about 20 minutes later, we heard cheers of excitement. It sounded like girls at a Justin Bieber concert. It was Sachin. He had found it. To reach the Gasteria, we had to shuffle along a collapsing cliff edge with less than 10 centimeters of stone beneath our feet and only 5 centimeters to hold on by our hands. This was probably one of the most dangerous plant expeditions we have ever done. Something that also was really cool was seeing the Canon-Chloe longiflora. You always see it in gardens, but to see it, not planted in the soil, but actually growing off a cliff was really, really nice. And as you can see in the picture on the far right, you can see how Alison is like slowly trying to creep herself up through the rocks. It really, really was super risky, but so worth it. And one of the things that we found was that Gasteria tucalensis is actually being used for muti. And this is not actually documented. It's documented for other Gasterias, but not for this one. And it was mostly used for like skin rashes. It'd be put into bath water and you would soak in it, or also put into chicken's water to treat coughs. Another trip that we did was to Bavan Dam. This was for a crew workshop. And really, this place is really, really beautiful. And there's lots of really cool things. And if you ever have time to go there, you should definitely go to Bavan Dam. One of the things that was found there was Habenaria bicolor, which hadn't been seen in 30 years and was definitely a new range extension. And so just to see this, I think was like Facebook went wild, iNaturalist went wild, everybody was, commenting. It was definitely something really special. This is also where I met these guys, and they have not been able to get rid of me since. When I told Mohammed Adamji I planned to use this photo of him, the one in the center, he responded with a string of angry faces and knife emojis. To make up for it, I also included the photo for when he helped Leon secure gold at the Chelsea Flower Show. It also serves as proof to all of you that I'm in fact friends with celebrities. I also try to find the funnier photos of them. Haha. Another trip we went on to was to Lager Farm. Just if you guys can just take notes for the first picture, you can see the kopje there at the top, and lower down is the forest. I'm going to talk about that more just now. But in the center photo, you can see James Halley and Mohammed precariously reaching for a Hesperanthes. And what the image does not capture is how the sheer deep drop beneath them is more than 100 meters. Absolutely terrifying. We were on the opposite side of that, really almost wetting ourselves. And this once again highlights the risks that we take in the pursuit of plants. Another species that keeps appearing in KwaZulu-Natal is the narrow-leaf form of Schizarcopus nervosus. And it's much larger compared to the more common one. And this form was originally thought to only occur in Mpumalanga, but it's far more widespread, and we should really keep our eyes out for it. And so the main reason we go to Lager Farm is to check up on the aloe sondozier populations. It's an endangered aloe. And I'm happy to report, I think on our last trip there last year, there were, I think, 300 clumps of them. So it's doing really well. There is aloe mite present, but I think that's perfectly fine. It's nothing to worry about. But on this particular trip, it was not the best weather, and we got stuck for hours. Eventually, a bakkie came along to pull us out, and they also basically almost got stuck. When they unstuck themselves, off they went to fetch a tractor, and a tractor had to pull us out. So much fun, a long day. So going back to that kopje, we found another grass aloe there, and at first I thought, oh, it must be a new species, you know, that's what everyone wants, thinks to, maybe me. But actually, no, it was just Aloe parviflora. But there was so much of it, and it's quite, you know, remarkable that you would find another grass aloe so close to each other, small, white flowering grass aloe. Different species, but there it is. And there was a lot of it, just on that little kopje. Nowhere else where we explored did we find it, just there. So on a separate occasion, I went with Carl Fourie to Lager Farm, and he's been looking into the taxonomy of strips. And it would seem that there's possibly 2 new species. And so they were already well known previously. So they're already published in Hilliard's and Burt's book many years ago of strips in Africa. So this was originally considered to be a natural hybrid between Streptocarpus sondozii and Streptocarpus grandis by Hilliard and Burt. But you continuously see this across several distinct populations. So we constantly see this interesting form or the species across several distinct populations. And many of these populations, the presumed parents are often absent. So it makes us consider that perhaps actually it is a new species. And a second strip also occurring there, where Hilliard and Burt proposed that this taxon represents a natural hybrid between Streptocarpus polyanthus subspecies vericundus and Streptocarpus prolixus. However, Streptocarpus prolixus does not occur in close proximity to Lager Farm, and furthermore, both Streptocarpus polyanthus and Streptocarpus prolixus typically occur in exposed rocky cliff faces, where you'll find this new species is typically occurring in moist gully habitats. But really, at the end of the day, genetic work really needs to be done on these strips, and I think that will really clear up any confusion, and I think this is something hopefully Carl will take on as he progresses in his botanic studies. One of our other adventures was to Babanangua Game Reserve. Oh, this place was also really, really beautiful, like breathtaking views all the time. And yeah, we walked with the big 5. Like there was Stuart Dunlop, the ecologist, he came with us. He didn't have a gun. Guys, he didn't have a gun. I was like, this guy needs a gun to protect us. But nope, he said, if an animal comes, you all come in together. I was like, I'm going to the vehicle as quick as possible. Anyway, so it was really a lovely time. We spent a couple of days there, but the reason we went there was for Gasteria gerstneri. And so we went there to collect seeds of this endemic and endangered aloe. And we collected lots of seeds. Most of them went to the Millennium Seed Bank, and some of them went to the UKZN Botanical Gardens, as you can see them growing there in the picture. We have plans to return some of these to Babanangua Game Reserve, but also we have given some to other botanical gardens already, and we'll figure out what to do with them, because we do have a lot. So while we're there, we decided to count all the seedlings present, and unfortunately, seedling recruitment was very low, ranging from 0 to 10% in each subpopulation. I also want to just take this moment to acknowledge Mary Thrash. She's the lady with the green shirt with the daisies on it. She's our oldest fossil, and it's still at the age of 83. She joined us on this conservation trip, and I think that really says anybody can join in. And just so you guys know, I checked with her before calling her a fossil. And some more good news. The conservation ecologist had messaged James to say they found a few more small populations of Allegorsneri around in the bush. So that's really good. And, you know, for something that's threatened and endangered, it's really great when we find more and more of them. So while we're there, or actually really previously, James had found an aloe, and there was a bit of confusion, you know, what could this be? And he like told me about it, and we discussed it and went back and forth. And I asked him, well, if you break the leaves, does it dry purple? And he said he doesn't know. And so off he went on a long walk to quickly go and get some leaves. And when we saw it dried purple, I said, it must be Aloe pinosa. Or perhaps we came to that conclusion together. I can't take all the credit. And what you can see from the map is that they occur in Pietermaritzburg, and Mapamulo, and now in Babanango Game Reserve. So there's a bit of a line there, and I wonder if it doesn't occur anywhere else in between. I suspect the status of this aloe may change, especially if you were just looking at it in Pietermaritzburg and in the Ashburton area. There's a lot of things that have been happening there, worse bush encroachment. They've been plowing up the roadsides, and I think if it were to be reassessed, I'll be a bit worried. I'm not sure about it as a whole across all the known populations, but especially in Pietermaritzburg and Ashburton. So I think it was in late 2024, a group went to Greytown to find this endangered Chenophophia lactifolia. But despite their best efforts, it was not found. However, on their journey home, Yolette's journey home, so first of all, she's one of our newer members, and she's really been pretty great. So as she was driving, she caught a glimpse of a red hot poker in the corner of her eye. She slammed on brakes, nearly sliding off the road. To our surprise, it turned out to be an unknown large roadside population of Chenophophia lactifolia. I mean, what's the chances? They drove all the way to Greytown, did not find it. On the way home, bam, there it is in Mooi River. And now if you look at the map, right, my house at the bottom there in Pietermaritzburg, the purple mark at the bottom, right? It is 72 kilometers away from this new Chenophophia site in Mooi River. I am convinced I heard a brake squeal all the way from my house. And it's just another example of how plants endanger our lives. From this discovery, we gained not only a new population, but also a new friend. On another trip sponsored by Crew, we went to Tunda Safari Private Game Reserve. It was very, very fancy. We saw so many animals and really, really cool plants. But something that I didn't actually see, the other guys saw, a bit jealous about it, was this Hemanthus. I mean, very, very special, but it's also from the photos, it was so cool to see how it grows. You know, it gets shaded by the rocks. It's in a lot of leaf litter, so it's probably very shallow soil, most likely. This is very cool. And also these monstrous pachypodiums. Oh my word, they were huge. Really, really cool things to see. I didn't think they got that big. It was one of my highlights from that trip. Enormous. Now for one of the recent trips to Lüneburg. This place, is amazing. There's basically it's not a crater, but it's almost, so it's not made from an asteroid hitting the Earth, but it's almost like a circle, this crater in the area, which is really, really cool to explore. And so the accommodation had no electricity, except in the Lapa, they had a bit of solar. The shower was a stick wall, and you had to go heat your own water up on the fire, and you would go and bath in that at night. And you go at night, and it's a bit dark, so no one could see through the gaps in the fence. And it really, really was a lovely place. So just for a quick story, every morning, Auntie Hetty, who's the owner, and her husband Jeff, Hetty would get up early, and she would make the fire in the morning so you can start boiling water or whatever you needed to do. But one morning, James beat her to it. And he made the fire, and he was glad with himself. He made this fire, and then Auntie Hetty came along, and she thanked James, and she was happy he made the fire. But he left a couple moments later. As soon as he left, she threw more wood on and she looked at it and she said, Darcy. And she gave a little chuckle to herself. It was quite funny. So we continued and we saw so many beautiful plants. Really, this place was beautiful. And interesting bugs and insects. Really was a great time. I had never seen, so if you look in the fourth picture from the top, aloe arborescens so robust and so big in my life. It was very different to what I've seen. They were almost like tree aloes. So just something quite different. Just some more pictures, this beautiful scenery, all the cool insects. And the one day it was a bit wet and cold. That didn't stop us. I didn't have a raincoat, but a week before, my supervisor actually gave me this poncho or one-time use raincoat as a gift, and I'm so glad I had it with me. So here again, it's just some more beautiful pictures of all the plants we saw, Brachystalma gerardii, some orchids, euphorbias, just beautiful, beautiful stuff all the way around. This was one of the big things we saw was the Habenaria barbertonii. I actually haven't received confirmation from Benny Bitterbeer, who's, an orchid specialist, but most people think it is Habenaria barbertonii. And it's, as you can see from the map, it's definitely a range extension. It's a pretty cool thing. This made my trip. It probably made my year, seeing Aloe modesta. I've looked for this. It does occur in KwaZulu-Natal. I've looked for it before in KwaZulu-Natal and have not been successful. I think it's just the luck of the draw when you see it. And you can see just from my hands, just how small this flower is. And it's also the only, from what I know, is the only scented aloe. And it had a very sweet floral scent, which talks to its, strict insect pollination systems that it uses. Isn't it just so cute and beautiful? Oh, just really, yeah. I shouldn't mention this, but I have a photo printed of it in my cupboard that I look at. So one of the more serious aloes we've worked on is Aloe nicolsii, critically endangered. So last year was our first seed collection trip. We went there and we collected not a lot of seed. There wasn't a lot of seed available, and also in terms of permits and that, we could only collect a small amount of the seeds. If you look at the herbarium record here, it was mentioned to be frequent. And it really isn't that frequent. There's on our trip this year, we found there's only about 60 plants. And if you look at the small photos in the center, you can see there was some poaching happening. And I'm pleased to announce that this year on our return trip, there was no evidence of poaching. And we were advised by KZN Izimvelo to collect all the seeds, which we did. And so our plans are we already have some growing from some seedlings growing from 2025. And the seeds we collected this year, some will go to Sanby, some's going to go to another nursery who's going to grow them for us. So we will eventually have plants and we will return them to Babanango Game Reserve. So not the location where they're found, but to a secure spot, Babanango Game Reserve. And because the poaching has seemed to stop, we're really happy about that. We're not concerned about the remaining plants. And because they're doing the seedlings and doing wild cultivation, we think we're pretty safe. When I look at that picture of me, it's like, if I was a granny, that's my granny picture. One of the more recent things that have come along our phones, I actually haven't seen this myself. I know Alison Young went out and saw this. So it's a possibly new Coniphobia species occurring in the Carkloof area on property, I believe, that belongs to SAPI. We definitely need to look into it more. I know they've tried to get out a couple of times and not really figuring out what it is. So is it a subspecies? Is it a new species? I guess time will tell. But if you look at that, I mean, look how many there are. How have we missed this? I just want to share my appreciation to Savannah and crew for all the trips they've taken us on. We really, really do appreciate it. I appreciate it a lot. And now a message of thanks. Alison Young has been a dear friend of mine for many years now, and over this time, she has taught me countless life lessons and shared her extensive knowledge of plants, especially in growing them. Alison has been my partner in many botanical adventures. Trips shared with her has brought me immense joy. My life is unquestionably richer for having you in it. I am deeply and internally grateful. Thank you, Alison. I look forward to many more adventures with you. Thank you, everyone. That's it.
Roy, would you turn on your video?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how fabulous the talk was. I really enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
And your delight in seeing things in their natural habitat when we're used to seeing them in nurseries or planted in gardens, I share that same delight. And I wasn't as privileged to have as many field trips. It's my retirement plan to join crew and get out there. But what many people might not know about me is I grew the Streptocarpus at Kirstenbosch. So I had one of the biggest taxonomical collections. So those Streptocarpus photos really had me going as well. And the other point of interest I had is how pale the color of the flowers are of the grassland
Yes.
aloes you were finding. And why is that aloe with a purple dye, purple sap? Was it ever used for dyeing?
I'm not too sure if it was ever used for dyeing. I think it'd be really difficult to extract a lot of it, but I'm not sure. We could look that up.
So interesting as an
But it's one of
identifying
the
feature.
features for some aloes.
Did you say that something was used for chicken coughs?
Yes, it was so that the Gasteria tuculensis. So it's just traditional knowledge, so for traditional medicine. Yeah, so there are other Gasterias that are documented with that for different things. But when we went there, they explained that that's what they used it for. So it was pretty cool to see.
Just never know what you're going to learn
Yeah,
on a webinar. So thank you so much.
most welcome.
All right, Roy. So it's over to Nick. Nick, if you'll turn over on your video, please. Thank you. I don't know why I turned mine off. Oh my word. So Nick, a great big welcome to you. Nick has a BSc Honors in Botany from UCT. And I love how short his biog is. You know, as we get more experienced in the field, our what we have to say about ourselves shrinks. And I think it's because plants keep us so humble. The more you know, the less you realize you know. But having said that, Nick Helm has a fabulous knowledge. He's an Africa-focused botanist with close to 40 years experience. 30 of those years has been as a freelance consultant and another 10 years as a plant hunter. He's a specialist botanist for EIA work in the winter rainfall parts of South Africa. So we've come a little closer to Cape Town again. And a special interest in rarities, novelties, and long-lost plant species. He has found over 150 new species in the Greater Cape Floristic region. And he is the top global plant observer on iNaturalist with about 12,300 observations at this point. Nick, what a resume, short as it is. Welcome, over to you.
Great, thanks, Cherise. Hello to everybody else. Yeah, so a summary of a 30 to 40-year career and hobby at the same time. I entitled it Needles in the Haystack, as many of my searches have been just that. And also a whole big dose of serendipity, as many of one's discoveries are purely serendipitous. And most of my searches have been in the GCFR, the Greater Cape Floristic region. But as you will see there, I regularly venture further afield, sometimes much further afield, and some of my discoveries have been there as well. So yeah, my little bio gave you the background, but essentially I've been privileged to live and work in the Cape region with its incredible plant diversity, driven largely by its topographic soil and rainfall gradients. And this is a good example of my life for 35 years or so, spending as much time as I can in the mountains and exploring those areas when I have free time, and then most of my working life down in the lowlands. This is in the Tulbagh and Ceres area. And as you can see, the lowlands heavily degraded primarily by agriculture and a major hotspot for threatened plant species as a result, given the
Nick,
habitat loss. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I don't think you're sharing your screen yet.
Am I not? Okay.
No.
How do I do that now? I have to go out and there. And now?
Share
Just
screen.
no. Yeah.
Oops, oh dear. Oh, wait, hang on. So, I mean, sorry, it's in Zoom. Hang on. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, just make sure it's open in the background and then there we go. And
Sorry.
then PowerPoint.
And back to PowerPoint. Oops, there we go. Okay, so what do I do now that it's on that slide?
So
Um,
Nick, just go back to slideshow and start from the beginning. You don't have to repeat, but if you could just click us through slowly until you're back on your slide.
This essentially was the beginning. Okay, so are we up? This is, yeah, this, and that's slide number 2, okay?
Great.
Right.
Perfect.
So, yeah, this is slide number 1. As I was saying, the areas in which I've been privileged to travel and work in Southern Africa, this is essentially my observations on iNaturalist. I can see very heavily focused in the Greater Cape Floristic region, but then also in many of the plant hotspots elsewhere in Southern Africa, ranging up to northern Zambia, the eastern highlands of Zimbabwe, the Great Dyke in Zimbabwe, the Zambezi Valley, the Soutpansberg, the Limpopo Valley, the sand forests of southern Mozambique and northern KZN, the Drakensberg, Leteni, southern Drakensberg, Ponderland, and then the Great Escarpment and the southern Cape Coast as well. My coverage of the Greater Cape Floristic region has been pretty good, extending pretty much the entire length of the region from Lüderitz and Aus in southern Namibia right across to the eastern parts of the Cape, much less so in that area because I find it's, sorry to say, but it gets increasingly boring as one gets past about George and one has to negotiate the garden route, which I somewhat cynically refer to as the alien route. And yeah, so I tend not to venture certainly along the coast much east of George, at least not for work anyway. And I've deliberately targeted a lot of poorly known areas over the years, obviously, as well, including the Great Escarpment, as you can see there, Sutherland, Fraserburg, Beaufort West, right across to Hogsback, Queenstown, etc. Going right back to my beginnings, I was scrounging around some photo albums of my mom's that I have languishing in one of my cupboards, and I came across these the other day. This is me in about 1975 at the foot of the Maskam or the Gifberg Mountains, and we'll come back to that near the end of the talk. It's in full circle, but I was very much into spending time in the daisies and the fynbos from an early age. My mum and I did, and often some of her spinster aunts did, frequent spring Namaqualand flower trips. This is in the Bido Valley where I was yesterday, although this is in 1975. And then Elandsby on the same trip. I do remember one particularly harrowing moment coming down Pekingese Kloof Pass into Citrusdal in my mom's old Rover 90, and the brakes had failed. So we geared down all the way. This was in the days before the pass was overrun by heavy trucks, luckily, so there was very little traffic. We managed to gear it down all the way into Citrusdal and then came to a shuddering stop outside the Citrusdal Hotel by parking in front of one of their fig trees. Nevertheless, yeah, my time discovering and rediscovering interesting plants in the Cape is arranged vaguely chronologically, I think, in this talk. These are the fabulous Riviersonne-Ent Mountains, which I not so jokingly refer to as the Riansonne-Ent Mountains, because I've had numerous rained out missions up these peaks, because one of the things that makes them interesting is that they get not only the northwest frontal rain, but then as the high pressure ridges in behind that and west of the Hottentots Holland Mountains, in other words, the Cape West Coast then becomes hot and dry, these sea-facing mountains catch the cloud that then is blown back again. So they get a double dose of rain, and that's the part that usually catches inexperienced botanists and hikers. However, we're going back to 1998. This was one of my first discoveries in those mountains. It belongs to the Stilbaceae, which was originally one of the more endemic of the Cape families, but now includes all sorts of other species, which extends it into the summer rainfall areas as well. Campylostachys, and John Rourke at the Compton Herbarium was a specialist in the family at the time. So I took my little specimen to him that I'd found on a 2-day traverse of the eastern Raffiosonent Mountains. And he was very much flummoxed by it and insisted we go out the following week to see the plant in the wild. There didn't seem to be very many of them. Luckily, I managed to relocate it after a bit of effort. It's always embarrassing if you can't relocate a plant that you did discover. It has happened to me a couple of times. And John subsequently described it as Campylostachys helmii, which was the first species to be named after me, first of about 12, I think, in these days. And most impressively, I managed to rediscover find a really nice population only a few years ago of the same species about 20 kilometers to the west. So I was worried that this would be yet another one of my discoveries that was likely to go extinct before I did. And luckily, it doesn't seem that that's going to be the case now, because we found a huge population of many hundreds of plants in this fairly remote valley, and extended the range significantly too. So it's quite possibly in between as well. And then moving on a year or two, I was involved with the Renosterfeld survey work that the Botanical Society under Crystal Mays commissioned in about 2000. Very little work had been done in the Swartland and Overberg Renosterfeld at that stage. So we started out by mapping all the remnants as best we could. This was in the times before most of the internet, of course, and before Google Earth and useful things like that that have made life of a plant hunter so much easier. So I had these huge laminated A0 sheets printed out for me, indicating where these Renosterfeld patches were. And I then had to go and try and interpret these giant laminated sheets on the ground and find if I was in the right place and ask for permission and go and survey. And I came up with quite a few interesting things. And probably the most spectacular was this Ixia flowering very late in the year, in October, which is at least a month or two later than most Ixias. And I collected a specimen, but we weren't sure what it was at the time. And then subsequently, John Manning and Peter Goldblatt looked at this genus in more detail about 10, 15 years later, and they realized it was new. And then we had to go and try and relocate it again. Luckily, it wasn't too difficult because it is very localized and very obvious. But as you can see, like most things in Cape Lowlands, very close to agriculture, it grows on steep south-facing slopes, which have probably saved it from obliteration thus far. And also flowers best after fire, in the couple of years after fire, which, like so many of the recent Cape flora discoveries, is the case. So not many people have really spent significant time in post-fire landscapes until recently, and it's definitely worth doing because so many of these bulbs have very short flowering periods and will only flower a year or two after fire with any vigor at all. Then coming back to Kate and Kate's presentation, Mkambathi has always been one of my favorite summer sojourns, and I've been going there since about 2001. And yeah, this is just a typical scene with your ponderland sandstones, leucodendron, pondoense growing in the rivers, river valleys, and palmite, which we know so well from the Cape streams, growing once again in the stream, and really could be a little slice of the Cape flora in some ways, except that that forest behind is packed with ponderland endemics, which you definitely don't get in the Cape. Anyway, my Cape eye was piqued by these little marshes with ericas in them, including Erica Abbotsy after Tony Abbott. And I think that's the pink thing you see in the foreground. So this was the very early days of digital photography. So I'm afraid I don't have a decent picture of the Restio that I found. But it lives in these sort of marshes and looks much like the plants that you're seeing there. It's exceedingly cryptic and is only known from Mkambathi Nature Reserve to this day. But Peter Linder described it for me in about 2002, a year after I discovered that. And then in the summer of 2002, I went up to the area near Graafrenet and the farm that is now Petersburg, also on the recommendation of John Rourke, who was friends with the guy who was an investment banker who owned the farm Petersburg, and he had a full-scale cricket oval on the farm, which is down at the base of those cliffs behind there. And he used to fly in a cricket team for a cricket match there, usually a foreign cricket team, an invitational once a year. Anyway, we were able to drive up and go walking on top of the escarpment, and you've got these beautiful dolerite ridges with magnificent grasslands all around, and it's very high. It's at about 2,100 meters, not far from the highest peak in the old Cape Province, being the Campusberg, which is up near New Bethesda, but the same sort of deal with a dolerite cap. And growing amongst these dolerites, on the very day that I proposed to my wife, I discovered Hesperantha helmii, flowering in, I think it would have been January or February. So summer flowering Hesperantha, unlike the true Cape Hesperanthas, and unlike the new Hesperantha that the Greaves found in Mkambaiti. But it's still only known from that particular area above Graafrenet, and Ralph Clark and his team found it just to the west of Graafrenet in the mountains there. And it grows with this truly spectacular Vechi, Dilosperma dieri, which I think must be the most spectacular of all the Vechis. Really, really stunning, covered in snow for long periods of the winter potentially. So a typical mound-forming habit of high altitude species. And then in about 2005, I went and did the Oorlogskloof hike that Wessel Pretorius had established. It was renowned as quite a tough 5-day hike, fabulous. You make little camps perched in the valleys amongst the trees, tents set up. All you have to do is take your sleeping bag and your food, and use the little brush that they provided to sweep the scorpions out of the tents, which always seemed to be a resident feature. And at the time, if I had only been aware of what I was looking at, I might have discovered the Porclivia mirabilis that has now been poached to extinction in this area, which we walk right past. But on the 3rd or the 4th day, I did manage to discover another new species of a Romulea, and it wasn't difficult to find because it was literally growing in these gloriously green moss pads right on the trail on the southern part of the reserve, very remote from the rest of the reserve and very difficult to get to by any means except on the hiking trail. Nobody seems to have collected it or photographed it at all since then, but it's a very pretty species and is clearly, with that dark tube, most closely related to a species that's endemic to the Kamiesberg and the Turingberg, which is about 150 kilometers to the northwest. So an interesting example of sister speciation. And then the Klein Swartberg Mountains have always been a big draw, along with the Swartberg as well, given their size and their height. Probably the premier Cape Mountain traverse, along with the Hex River traverse, is the much less commonly done Klein Swartberg traverse from Sevelwerkspoort to Turvekop, most of which is above 2,000 meters. And I managed to survive that walk and still collect a bunch of interesting plants, including Calatesta alba, which I might, I definitely freely acknowledge is not everybody's idea of a spectacular plant, but I'm particularly into daisies, merely because nobody else is. And the Cape is full of them, and the Cape has something like 25 monotypic daisy genera. In other words, genera with only a single species, which is the highest number of monotypic daisy genera for any region anywhere in the world. And so obviously I had to find all those, and this is one of them. And it's kind of the sister genus of Metalasia, so it has a vaguely Metalasia look about it. And anyway, it had only ever been collected by that doyen of Cape Mountain collectors, Elsie Esterhazen. She'd collected it 3 or 4 times in the Klein Swartberg Mountains, and I found it to be quite common on south-facing crevices and ledges right high up along the main ridge. So it was always fun to recollect things that Elsie collected and know you were walking in her footsteps. I did the same thing again in 2008 on the north slopes of the Langeberg Mountains. Interestingly, once again, right on this old Swellendam hiking trail. This is a now defunct portion, which was built with blood, sweat, and tears, and now nobody does because it was too difficult to service the hut in that area. Yet, literally right on this tail was this little ugly duckling Metalasia, that rather grey thing in the foreground. This is a glorious Technicolor close-up of it. You can see it looks quite a lot like the Calotetra that I just showed you. But it's it's basil in the Metalasia genus. In other words, the most primitive of all the Metalasias. So an interesting species to re-find once again. Only Elsie had ever collected it, and that just once. And yeah, so I was thrilled to find this guy in its only known locality, and yeah, I mean, quite what it would be related to or how it ended up in such a spot, who knows. And then in 2009, kitties came along, but that didn't stop me doing a whole bunch of flower trips. This is in the Roggeveld Mountains, west of Sutherland. It was always one of my favorite stomping grounds. And to my absolute amazement, when I was out botanizing for a couple of hours while my wife looked after the kids, I came across what I figured had to be an Agathosma, Mabuchu in the Rutaceae family. And I knew there and then that it had to be new because no buchus were known at all from the Roggeveld Mountains, although there are lots west of the Tankwa Karoo in the Cederberg Mountains. And Terry Trinder-Smith at the Bolus Herbarium at the time prepared a manuscript named Nick Helmii. Unfortunately, never published, but hopefully Rein Hoekstra, who is now taking on Agathosma in his minimal spare time as a doctor, will be describing this formally in the next few years, along with about 30 other new Agathosmas from the Cape. And then in 2005, I did a lot of work in the Kamiesberg, working on a project with Phil Desmet for Conservation International and doing a vegetation map of the Kamiesberg. And the Kamiesberg is interesting because it's the highest land point in the Namaqualand. This particular peak at 1,700 meters is the highest peak in the Namaqualand and is home to, well, let me talk to the map quickly. So yeah, the granite fynbos in red, which is where most of your endemics are sitting. So it's a paleo-endemic habitat. A lot of cool climate species are sitting in those upper red areas, and that they were presumably once better linked to the fynbos further south in the Nivetville and Matsikama escarpment when climate was cooler and wetter. And it's home to spectacular things like Protea namaquana, which is found only on the Rooiberg Massif, not dissimilar from Protea sulfurea, which occurs quite widely in the more southern Cape Mountains. But I turned up a bunch of interesting novelties in the Kamiesberg during this work, including a Morea, which is still only known from my collection in those high peaks, Morea helmii now. Looks a lot like Morea tripetala, but Peter Goldblatt split up that group into all sorts of new species. And even more amazing, a new Bibiana, which grows in a single river valley in the stream in these granite rocks, just east of the main peak of the Kamiesberg, which we named Rivulicola, which means of the river. Very unusual Bibiana growth form, looks more like a Romulea or another type of iris than a Bibiana. And good old Metalasia coming to the party again. Managed to find a new Metalasia up there, which Per Ola Karis and I described as Metalasia namaquana. Here perched in typical habit and habitat, right on top of the main ridges, looking out over the rest of Namaqualand. Has these beautiful cushion-shaped growth form to protect it from the often strong winds in that area, kind of mimicking the granite domes that it occurs on. One of my favorite habitats in the world. And then other Cape Mountains, I of course had to visit the Quadosberg, which is above the Worcester Hex River Valley. In those days, you could actually, if you had a rugged 4x4, drive up to the peak. And my old Land Rover managed to get me and some friends and my mom up there, which was quite something. And as one does, you have your whiskey looking out over the terrain that you've traversed. It was always fun camping with my mom and showing her some of the places that I went to. She was the primary inspiration in my love of plants. And yeah, another new Metalasia on that first expedition to the Quadosberg, literally growing right along the jeep track, which is now Metalasia helmii. It's not the most spectacular Metalasia, but hey, it'll do. And luckily, we've also discovered it further afield near Driekeilen Nature Reserve in the Warboomsberg area. So it's also not likely to go extinct before I do, which is good. For many years, Ross Turner, who was an Erica Fundi, and I were major walking buddies, and we traversed many a ridge and peak in the Cape Mountains, including the Lurafierberg in search of a long-lost Erica. And literally right on that peak, we came upon this little Geyserizer, which fortunately I managed to collect and photograph, which was almost unheard of in those days. And turned out to be a new species described as Altimontana, and is still only known from that very peak. I referred initially to some of the discoveries that one can make in post-fire environments in particular. And to my surprise, in the Stilbaai area, in the limestone ridges inland of Stilbaai, I came across a very tall, 3-meter tall Aspalathus, which I didn't recognize, and collected. And Charlie Sturton described it as Aspalathus nickhelmii only a few years later, and it has subsequently been found to be not uncommon in those limestone hills, but like many Aspalathus species, is a real fireweed. Grows super fast after fire, and this plant is probably only about 2 or 3 years old, and 3 or 4 years after fire will largely stop flowering and then not really be seen again until it might get burnt again 20 or 30 or even 40 years later. And then in the spring of last year, I started to look around for a property in Namaqualand, because Namaqualand has always had my heart as a botanical foraging area, and I was super lucky to be able to buy a farm near Nieuwerhurst. And I've spent almost a week there every month for the last 6 months, and have turned up all sorts of interesting little things. This Hessia in the Amaryllis family I discovered on the Turingberg about 15 years ago. The Turingberg is some 40 k's to the northwest, and it was only known from the 1 or 2 collections that I made on the Turingberg whilst I was up there doing surveys for wind farms. And to my utter pleasure and amazement, I found it on my new farm that I bought in October this autumn after good rains in May, and turned out to be really common in some of the drainage lines, along with another discovery that I also made on the same Turingberg in the seasonal pans. So this year in the Cape, we had really good rain in May and essentially no rain since then. So it's been a very atypical season, but it's been was exceptionally good for all the autumn flowering species, including this guy, Lachenalia argillicola, which I discovered on the pans in the Turingberg 20 years ago. It was only known from those pans until this year when I found it in 2 little pans on my farm. So that was a super interesting discovery. And literally 3 weeks after 10 days before this photograph was taken, there was no water in this pan. Then we had 30 millimeters of rain. It was flowering within 2 weeks. And within 3 weeks of this photograph being taken, the pan was dry and the Lacanalias had set seed already. And yeah, so my Namaqualand love affair kind of started very early on. My very first botanical trip in the UCT Botanical Club, Botany Club in 1987. We went up to the Kamiesberg, and then I did various trips with people like Tony Ribello and Craig Hilton Taylor up into Namaqualand surveying Allodichotoma and things like that. But in 1997, I managed to get hold of this amazing property on top of the Matsikama Mountains, or the Gifberg. And this is looking out towards the Nieuwoudtville Escarpment in the northeast and Van Reinsdorp on the left. And that's been a real pleasure to explore that area, because it hosts a lot of very poorly known species, one of which turned out to be this. So this was one of the serendipitous kind of discoveries. I wasn't even aware of it when I bought the farm, and I came upon it one day shortly after I bought it, and it's turned out to be Agathosma drageiana, which was only known from the drage type collected in 1830, and then a subsequent Phillips collection from 1911 on the Pearson Memorial Expedition to Namaqualand. But none of them gave detailed locality, so we didn't know where it was, and nobody managed to rediscover it. And it turns out the only known population is a little patch covering about 40 by 50 meters on top of the Matsikama Mountains on my farm. So that was fun. I've also managed to rediscover quite a few other long lost species on the property, which was not surprising. As you can see, it's a real mountain island reminiscent of the Venezuelan tepuis that rise up out of Amazonia, those sandstone massifs. So the top of the mountain is 1,000 meters, and the plain down below, and the Knausflugte is 200 meters. And there's a lot of seasonal pools like that, which host interesting invertebrates and frogs. But yeah, it's been great fun introducing my kids to it. There's spectacular caves. We've never built a house there because the caves do perfectly well, and there's a cave for every wind direction. And yeah, from here I can actually see my other farm in Namaqualand now 70 k's to the north in a completely different habitat. It's probably on the two farms, there's probably, well, on this property, there's about 500 plant species. On the other one, I haven't compiled a full list yet, but there's probably 700 plant species on that farm. And of those 1,200 species, I would say a maximum of 10% are held in common. So only 10% overlap species, which isn't surprising, seeing the other one occurs in semi-desert Knausflugte, but it's just an example of the incredible diversity that I've been privileged to explore over the years. A lot of it just being in the right place at the right time. And yeah, thanks, Mom, for the inspiration and the support all those years back. And yeah, I'm very happy to be able to continue what you started so long ago. Well, that's it.
You say that's it like it's nothing. That was amazing. It was so enjoyable. And the personal touches really make us feel connected to you, Nick. What a story of plant discoveries and needles in a haystack. And you know, you're quite right. It's often when you've walked up to the top of a mountain, you've traversed a long day, and you've almost given up finding what you were looking for, and you stop to have that hot cup of tea and that sandwich, and you look to your left or your right, you're like, oh, they're the planters we were looking for. It just happens too many times.
I've had that exact experience with a number of things. I've literally spent the whole day looking for something and then sat down for lunch and literally sat on it.
It's really crazy how that happens. So I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you so much to all our presenters for your passion, your stories, your photographs, sharing your experiences. It has been a wonderful webinar, and I'm very grateful to all of you for the time you've given up. Thank you. Thank you so much. If you could all turn on your cameras just for us to give you a wave goodbye, and to say that as soon as I can next year, you're all going to be back on. So keep hunting, keep searching, keep up the passions. You're an inspiring bunch, and it was just fabulous getting to know you all a little bit better. Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.